Have you ever stopped to wonder why human history feels, well, less like a straight line of just inventing better gadgets and more like a series of massive psychological earthquakes, right? It's wild. In this explainer, we aren't just looking at how our tools evolved. We're actually going to explore something much, much deeper. We're looking at how humanity literally levels up through our very consciousness and how that fundamentally changes how we interpret reality over time. So let's get into it.
Okay, let's dive right into this roadmap. First, we'll look at the evolution of consciousness, then move into culture, survival and order, hit modernity, the objective truth, shift over to postmodernity, and then tackle our current era, metamodernity, before wrapping up with how we live wisely.
Section 1. The Evolution of Consciousness.
So the core thesis we're working with here is that human civilization doesn't just level up because we happen to invent the plow or, the microchip. It levels up because our internal software gets a major upgrade. We're going to trace that exact lineage through 4 distinct eras today. We'll move from the basic, gritty struggle for survival in Era 1, push through the massive scientific leaps of Era 2, navigate the cultural shakeups of Era 3, and come right up to the complex, conscious integration of Era 4.
Section 2. Culture, Survival and Order.
All right, let's take a step back to our very first major shift. This progression is absolutely fascinating because it brilliantly shows the domino effect of human cooperation. Step 1 is agriculture. Once we actually stopped foraging and started farming, which, by the way, might have just been driven by our early desire to brew beer or bake bread, we suddenly had permanent settlements and a surplus of food. And guess what? That leads directly to Step 2, specialization of labor. People could finally become full-time builders or thinkers. But to manage all that, we desperately needed Step 3, a social contract. We had to create laws, governance, and shared norms, which ultimately culminated in Step 4, complex, organized civilization. It is literally wild to think that small bands of roaming nomads built the absolute foundation for all social order.
Now you gotta remember, in this foundational era, the meaning of life was incredibly pragmatic. It wasn't about seeking some deep philosophical enlightenment. No way. It was simply about staying alive, avoiding total chaos, and keeping your newly formed society from completely collapsing in on itself.
Section 3. Modernity, the objective truth.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because this brings us to a massive evolutionary leap. We're jumping right from inherited tradition to leaning heavily on the scientific and industrial revolutions. And the ultimate defining question for humanity became this: what is objectively true? Humans learned to do something totally radical here. We stepped back from blind, inherited beliefs, and we started investigating reality using logic, math, and experimentation. Basically, we demanded proof.
And when society collectively decided that truth was actually something to be discovered objectively, well, the results were explosive. Technological progress absolutely skyrocketed. Just think of the monumental jump from horse-drawn carts to the steam engine. Industrial production completely reshaped our physical landscapes. Democracy started replacing old monarchies. Capitalism took root, and modern education systems were born. Science and logic became the undisputed drivers of human progress.
Section 4. Postmodernity, shifting the perspective. But, absolute certainty rarely lasts forever, does it? Over time, that rock-solid confidence in objective certainty began to crack just a little bit. Now, what's really interesting here is the new defining question that emerged. It was no longer simply what is true, but rather whose truth and from whose perspective. Society started to wake up to the fact that a single authoritative worldview actually ignored or marginalized a lot of other voices. And suddenly, plurality stepped squarely into the spotlight.
To really grasp this shift, we need to contrast these two eras. Under modernity, we had universal truths, absolute foundations, and these grand narratives. Big, sweeping stories that supposedly applied to everyone, everywhere. But postmodernity pushed back hard. It argued that much of what we just accept as truth is actually made up of social constructs and heavily influenced by underlying power dynamics. So the concept of meaning completely shifted. It went from being something you universally discovered under a microscope to something that is subjectively shaped by our language, our culture, and our personal identities.
Section 5. Metamodernity, conscious integration. All right, this brings us to the real aha moment of this entire explainer. How on earth do we solve this immense, exhausting tension between cold, hard, objective truth on one hand and highly subjective, fractured meaning on the other? Well, the answer is conscious integration. Basically, it means holding reason and intuition, science and spirituality, individuality and community, skepticism and hope, holding all of that in a dynamic balance. It's kind of like modern mindfulness, right? Using rigorous objective neurobiology to validate ancient, highly subjective meditation practices. Metamodernity doesn't just toss out the previous eras, it humbly integrates their undeniable strengths while totally acknowledging their limitations.
So that brings us to the defining challenge of our current era. How can we live wisely by integrating objective knowledge, subjective experience, and shared meaning? You see, it's no longer about forcing a choice between hard facts and personal feelings. It's about consciously creating a shared meaning that actually honors the entire, messy spectrum of the human experience.
Section 6. How we live wisely.
Understanding this vast evolutionary journey isn't just some dry historical exercise, guys. It directly dictates how we govern ourselves and find meaning today. So the crucial point is, let's walk through this complete architectural build one last time. Back in nature and culture, driven by agriculture, meaning was literally just survival and order. Then in modernity, driven by science and logic, we achieved objective knowledge and tech progress. Next, post-modernity came in and critiqued those grand narratives to force a recognition of plurality and perspective. And finally, here we are in metamodernity, using conscious integration to blend science, culture, ethics, and spirituality. Meaning is now something we must consciously create and share together.
I absolutely have to share this profound quote directly from our source material because it just perfectly encapsulates our entire journey today. It says, "Humanity evolves not only through advances in technology and social organization, but also through increasingly sophisticated ways of knowing, interpreting, and embodying reality." I mean, wow. That is a remarkably powerful way to view our history and, more importantly, our potential.
So, as we navigate this incredibly complex, fascinating era of metamodernity together, I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. How will you consciously integrate the realities of our world, the hard objective facts, the incredibly diverse perspectives, and your own deep intuition to find and build shared meaning? I really hope this framework gives you a powerful new lens to view your reality. Keep questioning, keep integrating, and I'll see you in the next explainer.